The lights above the gymnasium ceiling twinkled like a constellation brought down to earth, casting a soft haze over the flowing gowns and crisp tuxedos below. Nora adjusted the corsage on her wrist. Tiny white roses nestled in pale green ribbon, while her sisters hovered close, whispering last-minute compliments and nervous laughter. It was prom night, and they were four incandescent visions of youth stepping into an evening they would never forget. Soft strains of the orchestra drifted through the air as they entered, arms linked and faces alight with anticipation. Lucinda's emerald dress shimmered with every step, reflecting the mirror ball's fleeting arcs of color. Marianne's blush pink chiffon swirled around her ankles, and Celia's midnight blue silk hugged her curves like a promise. Nora, in her ivory satin gown, felt as though she were floating, weightless, beneath a canopy of stars. They made their way to the punch table, where plastic cups trembled with fizzing fruit punch and slices of lemon bobbed among the bubbles. Their date, three brothers from the football team, stood waiting, polished shoes tapping, corsages in hand, eyes bright with admiration. A chorus of "You look gorgeous" rose in unison as each sister received her token of blossoming womanhood. Nora's breath caught when she noticed the detective's son, handsome and serious, watching from a corner, notebook clutched at his side, marking something in silent fascination. Moments later, the dance floor claimed them. Nora grasped Lucinda's hand and spun onto the checkerboard tiles, laughter bubbling up in time with the music. The world shrank to their tiny circle, four sisters moving together, hearts beating, in unison. For that night, they were invincible. Somewhere between the slow dance and the cha-cha slide, someone slipped into the shadows. A door creaked, the distant parking lot lights winked through narrow windows. A guest spilled a drink, drawing a startled gasp, then drowned in polite applause as another slow song began. The sisters, caught in a swirl of tool and rhythm, didn't notice the hush that had settled behind them. 20 minutes later, a shrill scream cut through the melody. The music stuttered to a halt, and the crowd parted like sea foam as Lucinda stumbled back, hand pressed to her throat, eyes wild with fear. Nora reached for her, but Lucinda shook her head and pointed toward the far end of the gym. There, by the emergency exit, lay an open box, its lid pried free, contents vanished. The priceless heirloom pearls meant for Lucinda's mother's anniversary gift, packed away for safekeeping, were gone. So were Lucinda's first dollar dance shoes, wrapped carefully in tissue. A hush rippled through the ballroom as whispers spread. How had anyone slipped away unnoticed in all that splendor? Who would dare? Their dates hovered uncertainly as the DJ summoned calm back onto the speakers. The detective's son stepped forward, notebook already open, eyes narrowing beneath the gym lights. He knelt beside the box, fingertips brushing the polished floorboards, scanning for clues. Nora's pulse thundered as she realized prom night had shifted, transformed into something more dangerous, something that would haunt them long after the rink-sized planet of lights dimmed. They gathered close to each other, sisters bound by that sudden unease. The music resumed, an off-key ballad this time, and they swayed to it, eyes darting to every exit. Prom was supposed to be a glittering rite of passage, a night of whispered dreams and heartfelt promises. But in the hush that followed as the detective's son scribbled down the first hints of a mystery, each sister felt a chill. Nothing about this evening would remain untouched by its dark echo. Soft morning light filtered through lace curtains as the four sisters gathered around the breakfast table, voices hushed and eyes bright with unspoken excitement. The previous night's events still glimmered in their memories like sequins caught on fabric, except for the vanished pearls, which cast a long shadow over their joy. Over steaming mugs of cocoa and fluffy waffles sprinkled with powdered sugar, they whispered the pact they'd made months earlier. No matter what happened, they would face it together. Their promise had begun as a joke one idle afternoon in July, when they wandered past a dusty attic trunk stuffed with faded photographs of their mother and aunts, smiling bridesmaids, deliriously happy under pastel hats and bouquets. Inspiration struck. What if they, too, could share something lasting, a keepsake of their sisterhood? And so, on the spur of a sweltering afternoon, they had resolved to craft matching lockets for prom night, tiny silver hearts inscribed with initials, each containing a secret message written in their own hand. Lucinda, the eldest and natural caretaker, had sketched out the design in her journal, carefully shading the filigree border. Marianne, ever the romantic, had composed the messages themselves, lines of poetry dreamed up at midnight, each an ode to loyalty. Celia, playful and precise, had led the hunt through jewelry shops and online archives until they found a jeweler willing to set the lockets in time. And Nora, shyest of the four, had surprised them all by insisting on engraving the date, February 25th, 20 years before, so the moment would be forever anchored in memory. That morning, they opened their purses and laid the lockets side by side. On the table, delicate gleaming promise keepers. Lucinda's red, always in all ways. Marianne's, hearts entwined anew. Celia's, sisters bound by time. And Nora's, simply one for all. They touched the cool metal, in silent ceremony, sealing a bond stronger than any gem. Yet as they spoke of future plans, college applications, summer photographs, late-night heart-to-hearts, they all glanced at Lucinda's wrist, now bare where the corsage had been. The missing pearls felt like an accusation. Someone had violated the night's magic, fracturing trust with a single bold theft. "I still can't believe they took Mom's pearls," Lucinda murmured, voice low. She traced the edge of her empty wrist with a fingertip. "It's not just about the money. They were hers on her wedding day." Marianne reached across the table to squeeze her sister's hand. "We'll get them back, we promised." Celia chimed in, hopeful grin in place. "Detective Rowan's boy is on the case. He was practically born knowing how to find troublemakers." Nora set down her cocoa, resolve stiffening her spine. "Then our locket promise matters more than ever. In 2 days, at our reunion, we'll all be there with those lockets and Lucinda's pearls back in her hands." Marianne raised her cup in a toast. "To 4 friends and 1 promise." As the clink echoed, the room felt charged with shared determination. Their counterparts at different ends of the table exchanged quiet smiles, each sister harboring her own plan. Lucinda would follow up at the school office. Marianne would scour social media chatter for any hint of chatter about stolen jewelry. Celia would contact the jeweler for any records of suspicious repairs, and Nora would slip back into the shadows of last night's dance floor after her shift at the cafe, hoping to catch someone looking too pleased with themselves. They finished breakfast in companionable silence, gathering the lockets and slipping them into hidden pockets. Outside, a slender branch tapped against the windowpane, a gentle reminder that winter still stubbornly clung to the land. The promise they had made, however, was warmer than any morning sun. That afternoon, as they dispersed to their separate routines, school corridors, part-time jobs, family errands, they carried the weight of both sisterly devotion and a shared mystery. But combined in their hearts was the conviction that no matter how far shadows fell, 4 friends bound by one promise could illuminate the darkest of secrets. And in that light, they would find Lucinda's pearls once more. The afternoon sun sank low, casting long shadows across the school courtyard as the sisters reconvened by the old stone fountain. Lucinda reached into her satchel to retrieve her spare corsage, one of 2 she'd insisted on ordering just in case, but her fingers met only empty lining. Her heart lurched. "Did you see it?" she asked, voice trembling. "I could have sworn I packed it." Marianne swiveled on the marble bench, eyes sharp. "We all checked our purses this morning. You had it when we left breakfast." Celia stood, brushing a wisp of hair behind her ear. "Let's retrace your steps. Where else could you have put it?" They moved through the corridors like detectives, retracing Lucinda's morning, locker to homeroom to French class. At each stop, they questioned friends and tapped lockers. No one had seen a stray corsage lying on a desk or fluttering against a wastebasket. By third period, whispers rippled through the hallway. The talk wasn't about stolen jewelry anymore, but about a vanishing corsage, a single spray of white roses tied with pale green ribbon. It was absurd, and yet the significance weighed on them. This small loss felt connected to the larger theft, as though someone was determined to unravel their perfect night. With the final bell, they gathered in the gym lobby where invitations to weekend dances and college fairs plastered every bulletin board. Nora moved to examine the lost and found crate, rummaging through an avalanche of scarves, textbooks, and plastic umbrellas. A lone glove peeked from the jumble, but no corsage. "Maybe Detective Rowan's son can help," Marianne suggested, nodding toward the doorway where he stood, arms crossed, scanning the students as though they were specimens under a microscope. When he saw them approaching, his expression sharpened. "You girls again," he said, tucking his notebook under his arm. "What is it this time?" Lucinda swallowed her frustration. "I lost my spare corsage. I think it might have been taken." He cocked an eyebrow. "Taken? It's sentimental," Lucinda said. "It's a backup for prom, and it's the same roses Mom wore at her wedding." He studied her face, then her empty wrist. "All right, let's look." They followed him back into the gym, where the faint echo of last night's music lingered in the rafters. He lifted a gym mat, peered beneath the bleachers, moved junk chairs aside. Still nothing. "Check the janitor's closet," he suggested. "Sometimes students stash stuff there." Celia led the way down a narrow corridor behind the stage. The closet door swung open to reveal mops, buckets, and boxes of stray ribbons. Marianne knelt and rustled through a cardboard carton labeled Drama Club Props. Her hand froze on something soft. She pulled out a wilted corsage, petals crushed, and edges browned. Lucinda's breath caught. "That's it." He knelt to examine the ribbon. "See these scuff marks? Whoever grabbed it dragged it through something rough." "Why would anyone take it?" Celia murmured. He stood, meeting their eyes. "Someone sending messages. First the pearls, then this, and we still don't know who." Lucinda took the corsage, fingertips brushing the frayed ribbon. "They want to scare us." Marianne's gaze hardened. "Let them try. We'll find out who's behind this." The detective's son scribbled in his notebook. "I'll ask around. Check cameras by the janitor's entry." They thanked him, the weight of the corsage heavy in Lucinda's hand. Back by the fountain, the roses drooped, but their resolve did not. The sisters traded determined glances. Loss could not shatter their bond. If anything, this small betrayal bound them closer. As dusk settled and the courtyard grew chill, Lucinda slipped the damaged corsage into a sealed plastic bag. "I'll fix it," she promised, "and whoever took it will regret underestimating four sisters who keep their promises." In the hush before twilight, their pact felt stronger than ever, and the missing corsage merely the first clue in a game they intended to win. Faint strains of laughter drifted down the empty hallway long after the last bell rang, leaving lockers clicking shut in the evening hush. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as the four sisters slipped between rows of metal doors, each step echoing their shared determination. Lucinda clutched the frayed corsage in one hand. Marianne's arm looped through hers, while Celia and Nora flanked them like shadows come to life. They followed the detective's son's suggestion to retrace possible routes, past the art room, where easels stood abandoned, through the science wing where skeleton models loomed in silent judgment, and finally to the music room, its door ajar. Marianne pushed it open, revealing rows of empty chairs and a lone trombone lying on the floor. The sisters paused. The door had been closed this afternoon. Inside, the air smelled of rosin and chalk dust. Celia knelt beside the trombone, turning it over. Look, scuff marks on the slide. Someone dragged it. She ran her finger along a streak of dirt, eyes thoughtful, probably where they knocked over the corsage. A sudden clang from the hallway made them start. Nora spun toward the door, heart hammering. A mop bucket rattled against the wall. Marianne flicked on her phone's flashlight. Probably just Magnus, the janitor, she whispered. He locks up in 5 minutes. They continued toward the auditorium exit, where security cameras watched each passerby. Lucinda held up the plastic-bagged corsage. Whoever took this must have passed right here. She pointed to the floor, where a smear of dirty footprints led past the camera. We need to see that footage. The detective's son appeared at the far end, waiting beneath the blinking exit sign. His notebook was open. Got the timestamps, he said, voice low. 9:14 p.m. to 9:17 p.m. That's your window. He tapped a button on his phone, illuminating a crude map of the hallway. The camera in the foyer covers most of it, but there's a blind spot here. He indicated a patch of hallway beside the trophy case, and another by the janitor's closet. Marianne frowned. That must be how they slipped away. She exchanged a look with Celia. We'll check for fingerprints where the case glass is dusty. Celia nodded and crouched by the trophies, dust motes dancing in the flashlight beam. She brushed her gloved fingertip across the glass, lifting a smudge. Here, she said, a partial print. The detective's son snapped photos. I'll run this through the database. It may not be you or me, but it'll narrow things down. Lucinda studied the trophies, each one gleaming with captured glory, most likely to succeed, best attendance, scholar-athlete. They seemed hollow now, reminders that achievements could be stolen as easily as small dreams. She sighed and turned, back to her sisters. We're chasing shadows, but we're closer than ever. Her voice echoed in the corridor, mingling with the distant hum of the heating system. Nora stepped forward, voice steady. Let's leave calling the footage until tomorrow. Right now, let's cover our tracks. Make sure no one follows us. She guided them into the stairwell, the echoing echo fading behind them, replaced by their synchronized footsteps on concrete steps. Each sister clutched her locket in a silent vow. The corridor's echoes would not drown their voices. At the bottom, they paused, the stairwell door rattling in the evening chill. The locket, promise glinted at their throats, silver hearts reflecting the hallway lights they'd left behind. Tomorrow, Lucinda said, we meet here again, same time. We'll have answers. They stepped into the chill air of the campus courtyard, night folding around them like velvet. Somewhere behind, the empty hallway awaited its next visitor. Its secrets held close, but the sisters were gone. 4 hearts, 1 promise, moving forward into the darkness with every echo in tow. The wind carried a crisp promise of winter as the sisters gathered beneath the skeletal branches of the old oak outside the gym. Their breath puffed in small clouds, and each exhalation felt like a plea to move forward. Lucinda unfolded a scrap of paper, edges frayed where she'd smoothed it a dozen times. On it were 4 scrawled words, I dare you to... They passed it in turn, each of them reluctant but drawn into the game they had invented to ease the tension. Marianne's eyes glittered with mischief as she creased the paper. I dare you to sneak into the principal's office tonight and photograph any suspicious visitors, she wrote, then refolded the note, hiding a grin beneath her scarf. Celia accepted the challenge with a silent nod, her pulse thrumming with equal parts fear and thrill. She tucked the paper into her pocket and handed the folded scrap to Nora. In the dim streetlight, Nora's face was set, determined. She leaned close to Marianne. "And I dare you to interview the night janitor," she warned, without raising suspicion. Marianne's eyes widened, but she accepted with a confident shrug, sliding the paper along to Lucinda. Lucinda unfolded it, reading both dares, then paused. The chill deepened around them as she weighed her turn. No one else knew the next challenge would cut deeper than a prank. Lucinda dipped her pen and, in a careful loop, wrote, "I dare you all together to confront whoever stole my corsage and demand answers." Silence settled over them like snowfall. Each sister exchanged a hesitant glance. Marianne's lips parted, then closed again. Celia tilted her head, unspoken questions passing between them. Nora's jaw tightened, breath catching in her throat. Finally, Lucinda slipped the paper into her pocket. "We keep our promises," she said softly, "and this is the only way to end it." They spent the rest of the afternoon at their separate tasks. Marianne lingering by the janitor's station between classes, Celia mapping the fastest route to the principal's office on her phone, and Nora volunteering to unlock the school library late that evening. All the while, Lucinda rehearsed her words in her mind, tense with the knowledge that they were about to step from whispers into confrontation. That night, they regrouped at dusk in Lucinda's family sedan. Headlights off, parked behind the athletic fields. The moon leaned low, silvering the grass and casting long, cool shadows. Lucinda opened the back door and laid the corsage, still damp from her tearful rescue, on the seat between them. Celia sat beside it, tracing the crushed petals. "Are you sure?" she asked in a hushed voice. Lucinda nodded. Marianne and Nora took their places on either side. The engine idled softly as Lucinda turned the key and pulled away from the school, heading toward the older wing where the janitor's quarters shadowed the back fence. They moved as one, a silent quartet bound by love, loyalty, and that unspoken dare. The empty hallways awaited their footsteps, but tonight the sisters would speak loudly enough to shatter silence, and when they stood before whoever held the answers, they would do it together, hearts linked by promise and courage. Moonlight filtered through the tall windows of the abandoned janitor's office, painting the peeling linoleum floor in pale squares. The sisters slipped inside, breath shallow in the hush. Lucinda held the battered corsage like a fragile promise, its petals curling in fear. Across the room, the janitor's desk stood empty, save for a lone coffee mug stained with time. Nora found the old filing cabinet first. Drawer ajar, as if someone had left in haste. She tugged it fully open, revealing folders stamped with dates and initials. Dust motes danced in the light as she rifled through them, heart pounding. "Nothing here about stolen items," she whispered, voice thick with disappointment. Marianne lingered by the window, arms crossed, gaze flicking toward the moonlit courtyard. She cleared her throat. "I overheard him on the phone last week," she began, voice low. "He spoke of handling it discreetly and not wanting trouble for the girls, but he never said who it was." Her confession hung in the air, a thread begging to be chased. Celia knelt beside the desk. Prying open a bottom drawer, the hinges groaned in protest. Inside, she found a small notebook bound in faded leather. She thumbed through pages of cleaning logs and maintenance schedules, then paused at a note scribbled in the margin, saw someone lurking by the gym foyer late, claimed to be lost, but ticket stub looked genuine. Lucinda stepped closer, eyes bright. "What kind of ticket?" Celia pointed. "For the spring dance last year. There's only one way people get those." A hush fell. The sisters exchanged glances. Student IDs, administrative passes. Someone within the school had both the means and the motive. Nora's hand tightened on the corsage. "We need to know who." Marianne traced the janitor's messy scrawl. "He wrote he gave the ticket to someone who Seemed safe. Lucinda swallowed. Who did he think was safe enough to give it to? Celia closed the notebook with a soft snap. Let's ask him directly. They moved toward the back door, where the night janitor often retreated for breaks. Each footstep echoed, anticipation coiling in their chests. As they stepped into the corridor, a soft footfall met them. The janitor emerged, mop in hand, eyes glinting with surprise, and something else, guilt. Lucinda squared her shoulders. We know you saw someone by the gym last night and you helped cover it up. Her voice trembled, but her gaze was steady. We need you to tell us who. The janitor's grip on the mop loosened. For a long moment, he stared at the corsage cradled in Lucinda's palm. Then he sighed, shoulders slumping. All right, he said quietly, but you won't like what you hear. They leaned in, hearts drumming. He wiped a hand on his overalls, staring at the floor. It was the football coach. Silence swallowed them. Marianne's jaw dropped. Celia stifled a gasp. Nora's hand flew to her mouth. Lucinda's breath caught. Coach Brevard, whose booming voice ruled the field and the halls. He borrowed my pass, the janitor continued, voice shaking. Said he needed to check the gym's security for the banquet setup. He told me not to question it and that he'd return it before morning. He met Lucinda's eyes. He slipped out after curfew. I should have stopped him. Lucinda felt the room tilt. Why would he steal a corsage or those pearls? The janitor swallowed. He's got debts. People he owes money to. I think he planned to sell them for cash. Nora's voice trembled. But why target Lucinda? He shook his head. Not personal, just expensive. He figured no one would suspect the prom decorations. A storm of emotions roiled inside Lucinda. Betrayal, anger, sorrow. She clutched the corsage to her chest. We trusted him, she whispered. Marianne stepped forward, voice fierce. You trusted him, but you helped him hide it. He nodded, tears gleaming. I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting the school, not you. Lucinda closed her eyes, the weight of midnight's confession settling over them. The truth tasted bitter, but at last the shadows had names. The coach, a figure of authority, undone by desperation. When she opened her eyes, her sisters stood beside her. 4 sisters, 1 promise, stronger than deception. In that silent corridor, they vowed to reclaim what was theirs and to shine a light on every secret hidden in the school's shadows. The darkness had whispered lies, but now at last they had the truth. The gym pulsed with life as preparations for the prom's final hours reached a fever pitch. Streamers of silver and blush draped from the rafters, and the scent of fresh flowers mingled with sweat and excitement. Lucinda paused at the entrance, clutching her restored corsage, its petals now carefully pressed and reshaped. Tonight, the dance meant more than memories. It was their chance to confront the coach and reclaim their night. They moved as a united front, Lucinda and Marianne on one side, Celia and Nora on the other. Lucinda spotted Coach Brevard near the punch table, his suit jacket unbuttoned and loosened tie dangling. He laughed at some private joke, drink in hand. The sisters exchanged determined glances and approached. Marianne cleared her throat. Coach Brevard? His laughter died as he turned. Lucinda stepped forward, voice steady. We know what. You did? He blinked, scanning the crowd before focusing on the corsage in her hand. I don't know what you stole my mother's pearls and my corsage, Lucinda said, holding it up. The janitor told us everything. Whispers rippled through the attendees. Eyes turned. Phones began to raise. Coach Brevard's, her face drained of color. He stepped back. Those were decorations. I needed money. My family's struggling. I never meant to involve students. Nora's eyes blazed. You meant to sell them, to profit off our memories? She gestured at the band stage where the orchestra tuned violins. This night was special to us, he swallowed. I'm sorry, I thought if I slipped them back before morning, no one would notice. Celia folded her arms. Except, we noticed. We noticed you sneaking through hallways in the middle of the night, trampling our dreams in your desperation. Murmurs spread. The principal, alerted by the commotion, threaded through the dancers toward them. Coach Brevard's shoulders slumped, his bravado evaporating. You'll return everything, Marianne demanded, voice low. Now. He nodded, hesitation etched in every line of his face. Yes, I will. Lucinda's gaze softened for a moment, remembering the coach who'd cheered them on at games. But trust, once broken, left scars as deep as winter's frost. We'll hold you to that, she said. A spotlight switched on above the center of the floor, and the DJ's voice crackled through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the last dance. The first notes of a slow ballad began, haunting and sweet. Marianne offered her hand to Celia. Shall we? Celia nodded and they moved onto the dance floor as a hush fell. Nora followed Lucinda, each sister. Finding her place as partners cleared the way. Coach Brevard watched from the edge, guilt and regret shadowing his posture. They formed a circle facing inward, each holding her locket against her heart. As the music swelled, they began to dance, not with dates, but with each other. Lucinda closed her eyes, letting the melody wash over her as she felt the rhythm of sisterhood pulsing through her veins. Around them, the gym transformed into a sanctuary of forgiveness and resilience. The stolen pearls glinted on a nearby table as a student returned them, and the coach quietly retrieved the corsage and set it where it belonged. The principal observed, nodding approval as the four sisters spun slowly, their gowns whispering, against the polished floor. In that final dance, all the darkness of recent nights fell away, leaving only light of unity, of reclaimed innocence, and of promises kept. Each sister's footfall was a testament to the strength they found in one another. And as the final chord faded, they embraced in the center of the floor, sweat-damp and triumphant, ready to step beyond the shadows into whatever dawn awaited. The sun slipped over the horizon in pale streaks of pink and gold, creeping through. The bedroom curtains where Lucinda lay awake, heart still echoing last night's triumph. Restlessness tangled her limbs, and she rose quietly, careful not to wake Marianne, who still slept soundly beside her. The house was hushed. Only the soft hum of early morning traffic outside betrayed the world beyond their windows. Downstairs, the kitchen light glowed warm. Lucinda found Celia stirring coffee at the counter, her eyes distant. Nora was already at the table, rifling through the morning paper. The headline leaped out at Lucinda. Coach Brevard resigns after prom theft scandal. Beneath it lay a photograph of the coach, shoulders bowed, escorting the principal toward the school's entrance. It's all over town, Nora said without looking up. They found everything in his locker, including my grandmother's pearl brooch he lifted alongside your corsage. She tucked the paper aside. He claims he was trying to cover his daughter's tuition. Still, people are calling it betrayal. Celia set a mug before Lucinda. You look like you haven't slept. Are you okay? Lucinda sipped the coffee, warmth spreading through her chest. I'm fine. Just thinking. They gathered around the table as Marianne appeared, tying her hair into a loose braid. I heard on the news they're suspending him without pay, pending charges. She dropped onto a chair, fingers wrapped tight around a spoon. Never thought a night of dancing could topple a career. Silence settled, broken only by the clink of cutlery. The morning light shifted, illuminating the sisters' thoughtful faces. Each of them carried echoes of last night's revelations, shame. For the coach, relief for themselves, and an unexpected emptiness at how quickly the world had turned. Lucinda folded the newspaper and placed it carefully in a drawer. I thought once we got the pearls back and made him admit it, I'd feel satisfied, but it's strange. I feel shock instead. She paused, glancing at her sisters. He wasn't just any teacher. He was someone who cheered us on. And last night, under all those lights, we watched him crumble. Marianne reached across and squeezed Lucinda's hand. People aren't just villains or heroes. Sometimes they break under pressure. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it explains it. Nora frowned. I get that he had debts, but stealing from students, he risked everything. And for what? Tuition. Money. Celia leaned back, eyes on the window. It's a wake-up call. We saw the darkness in the hallways, and it was closer than we thought. They ate in contemplative quiet, the only sound the kettle's distant whistle. When the table was cleared, Lucinda stood and moved to the window, watching neighbors shuffle to cars, children waiting for school buses. The world outside carried on, as though no drama had stirred in their home. She turned to the others. We solved the mystery, but it feels incomplete. There are questions still unanswered. Marianne tilted her head. Like what happened to the pearls before they landed in his locker? Did he get them directly from the gym, or was someone else involved? Nora's brow furrowed. And who tipped off the press? It moved fast. Too fast. Celia tapped her chin. The detective's son. He must have shared with someone, maybe the principal or the school board. But did he tell us everything he knows? Lucinda's pulse quickened. We need to follow that thread. They formed an unspoken pact, voices low as they planned their next moves. Visiting the school's security office to review camera archives, speaking with the principal about chain of custody for the evidence, and confronting the detective's son about what he'd recorded in his notebook. As dawn brightened into full morning, the sisters felt the weight of their promise shift. They had uncovered the truth, but another layer beckoned, one of accountability, of examining how power can corrupt and how easily trust can fracture. Lucinda drew a deep breath. This isn't over. Not until every question is answered. Outside, the day began in earnest, but inside the kitchen, 4 sisters leaned close, bound by determination. The silent shock of dawn had awakened something new, a resolve to chase every echo until they found what lay hidden in the shadows. 2 decades had slipped by, like a half-forgotten melody, each note of that prom night reverberating in the corners of memory. The sisters, now women marked by time's gentle hands, reunited in the school's empty auditorium, its polished floorboards still echoing the ghost of their final dance. Dust motes drifted in sunbeams, cutting through tall windows, and the faded streamers overhead trembled with silent anticipation. Lucinda, her hair threaded with grey, smoothed the front of her tailored blazer and glanced at her siblings. Marianne, whose laugh lines spoke of a life rich in love and loss. Celia, poised as ever, her fingers flicking open a small leather notebook, and Nora, steady and watchful, arms folded across her chest. They had answered an anonymous invitation, a summons promising revelations buried long ago. Marianne's voice trembled as she stepped forward. "It's been 20 years," she said, "and yet the whispers never stopped." She ran a hand along the stage's edge. Every reunion, every anniversary, someone mentions that night. A hush fell as Nora produced an envelope, yellowed at the edges. "This arrived 2 days ago," she explained, sliding it across the stage. Lucinda retrieved it, fingers brushing the embossed return address, Detective Rowan. Inside lay a single sheet, typed, formal and chilling in its brevity. "I have uncovered new evidence regarding the prom thefts. Meet me where it all began." No signature adorned the note, no time-stamp marked its urgency, yet the sisters felt their hearts accelerate, the same tight thrill that had spurred them into midnight confessions so long ago. Celia checked her watch. He wants us here, on this stage, at sunset. The afternoon sun slanted through the auditorium, gilding rows of vacant seats. We need to be ready. They spent the next hours retracing old steps, pausing by the trophy case where Celia had lifted smudged fingerprints, inspecting the janitor's closet door with its chipped paint, and stepping into the gym foyer where shadows once hid the coaches. Furtive passage. Each location whispered fragments of their youth, echoes of courage and betrayal, mingled with the thrill of discovery. As the afternoon waned, they gathered backstage, their shoulders brushing in solidarity. Lucinda fingered the locket at her throat, inscribed "One for All," its silver surface dulled by years, but no less radiant in their eyes. 20 years had tested their bond, yet here they stood, ready to chase the next whisper toward truth. Outside, a clock tower tolled 4. Marianne exhaled. He'll be here soon. Just then, footsteps crossed the stage. The detective emeritus, now, with streaks of white at his temples, stepped into the golden light. His posture was erect, eyes steady. "Thank you for coming," he began, voice calm but edged with urgency. "I've kept silent for 2 decades, but what I've discovered can no longer wait." Celia's hand went to her notebook. "What is it?" He produced a slim file, tapping it against his palm. The coach was only part of the story. After he returned the pearls and corsage, someone planted evidence to cover a larger operation. He slid the file across to Lucinda. "This isn't just about stolen jewelry." The sisters exchanged puzzled glances. Lucinda opened the file, photographs, receipts and transcripts dating back 20 years. As she scanned them, her breath caught. "Black market auctions," she murmured. "They moved stolen prom items through a collector's network." Nora stepped closer. "And the coach was just a pawn." He nodded. "Precisely. He thought he was borrowing decorations. But the real mastermind was someone within our own circle." His gaze shifted to Celia. "Your jeweler." Celia blinked. "The one who set our lockets?" He pressed a photograph into her hand. A dimly lit workshop, hands wrapping a corsage identical to Lucinda's. He recorded every appraisal and resale. He trafficked heirloom pieces, corsages, jewelry, even trophies for wealthy collectors. Marianne's eyes flashed with anger. "He betrayed our trust." The detective folded his hands. "I've arranged for his arrest at midnight right here on campus, but I needed your testimony." As the sun dipped lower, the auditorium's hush deepened into an electric hush, alive with the weight of 20 years. The sisters stepped forward, united as they once were, bound by a promise that had withstood time and betrayal. Lucinda closed the file with quiet resolve. "Then let's finish this dance." And as the final light faded, 4 sisters prepared to reclaim their story, turning whispers into truth beneath the cavernous echo of an empty stage. Detective Rowan sat behind his desk, the amber glow of a single lamp illuminating stacks of faded files and yellowing photographs. He rubbed his temples, eyes fixed on a grainy image of a jewelry workshop, tools strewn across a workbench, delicate filigree pieces half-finished, and in the corner a small box labelled in looping script. "Locket orders Feb 25, 2004. His finger traced the date. 20 years ago. He leaned back, flicking off the lamp. In the dim light of the early evening, the office felt heavy with memories. He remembered the night he first met the 4 sisters. Young faces lit by the glare of camera flashes, corsages quivering on their wrists. He had seen their anguish when those pearls vanished, felt their determination as they pressed him for answers. And he had kept digging, for reasons more personal than professional. A soft knock on the door snapped him to attention. He straightened and called, "Come in." Lucinda entered, her eyes steady but curious. Marianne, Celia, and Nora followed, each carrying their own quiet resolve. He gestured to the table. "Please, have a seat." They sat around him in a semicircle. Detective Rowan tapped the photograph again. "I promised you the truth tonight, and I intend to deliver." He produced a sealed envelope, breaking the wax with a soft crack. Inside lay a thin manila folder. He opened it and withdrew a ledger, the jeweler's sales log, painstakingly copied line by line. "You remember the jeweler you all visited? The one who crafted your lockets?" he asked. They nodded. "His name is Marcus Bellamy." On the surface he seemed reputable. A small storefront downtown, glowing reviews, custom work. He spread pages across the desk, highlighting entries dated February 2004, dozens of lace-trimmed corsages, inherited pearls, and even a pair of dance shoes, all logged at surprisingly low prices. Celia's breath caught. How could he afford that? Rowan pointed to a column marked Collector Code, a series of initials indicating the buyer. "I cross-reference these codes with auction records. Each code corresponds to wealthy clients in Europe and Asia, known for purchasing rare memorabilia." He tapped another line. "See this entry? February 24, 2004, special order, Yuba State Gym. Price, $1,200. Collector, S.K." That was the coach's payment. Marianne leaned forward. "So he funneled stolen school decorations directly to Bellamy, who redistributed them to secret buyers." "Exactly." Rowan closed the ledger. "Bellamy harvested relics, lockets, corsages, pearls, and trafficked them through an underground network. The stolen items from your prom were only small fragments of a larger scheme." Nora's eyes narrowed. "But why? Why target prom night?" Rowan sighed. "Prom pieces are highly sentimental and unique. Tickets, corsages, jewelry with personal engravings. Collectors prize authenticity. And because these items belong to students, they vanished quietly. No large-scale investigation would follow." Lucinda's hand drifted to her locket. "So we were unknowingly part of this trade." He nodded. "Your case was the linchpin. I followed the money trail from Bellamy's bank deposits, large sums traced to offshore accounts. I obtained a warrant to search his store tonight." He paused. "And there's more." He reached into his desk and pulled out a small velvet tray containing a single locket. Its heart-shaped silver matched the design of their own promise pieces, but this one bore no inscription. Instead, inside, a tiny camera lens peered back. The detective's voice was low. "Bellamy implanted these microcams in some lockets. Yours included, to record addresses, routines, even security codes. He sold that footage along with the jewelry." Gasps rippled across the group. Marianne's hand flew to her throat. "He violated our privacy." Rowan rose and walked to the window, staring out at the dusk-lit street. He exploited trust and sentimentality, turning memories into commodities. He turned back. "I've summoned a task force. Tonight they'll arrest Bellamy, seize his records, and dismantle the network. But I wanted you to hear it first. From me." Lucinda stood, locket trembling in her palm. "Thank you for uncovering all of this." Celia rose too, determination flaring in her eyes. "We'll testify. We'll bring everyone involved to light." Nora closed the distance, resting a hand on Rowan's shoulder. "You gave us the final piece." He offered a small, weary smile. "Your promise helped me keep mine." As they filed out of the office into the moonlit corridor, Detective Rowan watched them go. Four sisters stronger for the truth, ready at last to close a chapter that had haunted 2 decades. The discovery had been his, but the resolution belonged to them. Dust motes danced in the pale glow of Lucinda's flashlight as she and her sisters stepped into the school's archive room, its vaulted ceiling lined with metal shelves, groaning under the weight of dog-eared binders and cardboard boxes. The air smelled of mildew and printer ink, and each footstep kicked up whispers of forgotten reports. Marianne shivered. This feels like stepping into another world. Nora led the way, flashlight sweeping across rows labeled by year 2003, 2004, 2005. She paused at a lower shelf marked Prom Night 2004 in tidy marker. The box sat wedged between oversized binders and looked unremarkable, a plain cardboard container sealed with yellowed tape. Celia knelt and pulled it free. Here goes nothing. They carried the box to a long table beneath a flickering light. Lucinda cut the tape with her pocket knife, fingers trembling. Inside lay tattered programs, a handful of ticket stubs, and several unlabeled manila envelopes. She lifted one envelope, heart pounding. It's from Detective Rowan's evidence collection. Marianne peered over her shoulder. There are 3 of these. She tapped each envelope, noting the dates scrawled in black ink: March 2004, June 2004, September 2004. Why weren't these in the main case file? Celia's flashlight beam trembled as she cracked open the March envelope. Inside, neatly folded, was a photograph of the janitor's closet door, ripped paint and all, and beneath it, a small key wrapped in tissue. "This must open something," she whispered. The June envelope held handwritten notes, interviews, with students who claimed to see a tall figure slipping through the gym foyer. One name repeated, Student ID 4823. The final envelope, dated September, contained letters from a lawyer demanding Bellamy cease sales of stolen relics, along with the reply promising compliance that never came. Lucinda laid the letters flat. Someone moved these here deliberately after the case closed. Her pulse quickened. Who had access to Rowan's archive? Nora stood, scanning the room's shadows. Only a handful of people. Rowan, the principal, and... She frowned. The archivist, Ms. Harper. Marianne's brow furrowed. Ms. Harper retired 10 years ago, but she could have moved files before she left. Celia's light landed on another box 2 shelves above. Look, another unmarked box. She climbed a small step stool and eased it down. This one was smaller, heavier. They carried it back to the table and peeled away tape. Inside lay dozens of unlabeled VHS tapes and a leather-bound journal. Lucinda slipped on gloves and opened the journal. The first pages were entries by Ms. Harper. Notes on security camera blind spots and detailed observations of unusual late-night activity around the gym. One entry, dated February 26, 2004, read, Pearl necklace missing. Witness, Coach Brevard. Evidence relocated to Box H. Follow up tomorrow. Marianne's voice was breathless. Box H, meaning here in archives. Nora held up a tape. These VHS looked like security footage, but without labels. Nobody watched them. Celia rifled through the tapes, finding one dated February 25th, 2004. This is the night of the prom. Lucinda's hand tightened on the journal. We need to view them. She looked at her sisters, eyes bright with urgency. This could show everything. Who really took the pearls, how the corsage was handed off, even Bellamy's first contact with the coach. They gathered around a dusty cart with an ancient VCR perched atop. Nora plugged in the tape, and the hum of machinery filled the room. The screen flickered to life, empty lockers, then the gym foyer, and suddenly a familiar figure slipping the corsage into a pocket. But next to him, another silhouette blocked the camera, shorter, careful, deliberate. Marianne leaned in, breath catching. That's not Bellamy. Lucinda paused the tape on the shadowed figure. Whoever it is, they knew exactly where to hide. As the image glitched and the sisters exchanged astonished glances, the weight of hidden archives settled around them. Years of withheld evidence, silent boxes concealing truths. The mystery deepened, this time urging them to uncover not just stolen keepsakes but the very hands that orchestrated the shadows. And in that quiet archive room, they realized the story they thought was solved had only just begun. The photograph lay on the oak table, its edges curling from age and handling. Lucinda traced a fingertip over the grainy image, the gym foyer empty but for two figures frozen in mid-stride. One was unmistakably the coach, head lowered as he slipped the corsage into his pocket. The other, standing just behind him, was smaller, shoulders hunched, face obscured by the brim of a cap. Marianne leaned in, voice soft. This was from Ms. Harper's journal, Box H footage. She tapped the image. I always thought Bellamy acted alone. Nora frowned at the photograph. But look here, she said, circling a slender ankle clad in ankle-length boots. Those boots aren't his. He wore running shoes. Celia slid her glasses on and examined the second figure. And that jacket, faded denim with a patch on the shoulder. Someone who wanted to blend in, but left a clue. Lucinda's pulse quickened. She held the photo up to the light, squinting at the indistinct patch. Could be a club logo or a band emblem. If we identify it, we find our second culprit. They gathered around the scanner they'd borrowed from the library. Lucinda gently positioned the photo beneath the lid and tapped Enhance on the computer. The screen flickered as algorithms worked to sharpen the grainy image. Gradually, the patch came into focus, a stylized H encircled by laurel leaves. Marianne scribbled notes. H. Harper? Could it be Ms. Harper herself? Nora shook her head. She retired a decade ago, but what if she trained someone, an apprentice or family member? Celia clicked through frames. There's another shot. This one captured the figure's profile as they straightened, revealing a cascade of curly hair. She zoomed in further. Female, mid-30s in 2004. That could match Ms. Harper's niece, Helena. She volunteered. Here sometimes. Lucinda exchanged a look with Marianne. We heard Helena worked at Bellamy's shop for a brief stint that winter. Suddenly, the door creaked. The detective's son stepped in, holding a folder. I've got the school directory, he said. Helena Harper is listed as a janitorial assistant in 2004. She'd have access to both janitor's quarters and the archives. Marianne's eyes narrowed. So she wasn't just moving boxes, she was orchestrating evidence transfers. He nodded, laying the directory beside the photograph. And there's more. She filed a complaint against Bellamy 2 weeks before prom, claiming he pressured her into helping with special orders. But the complaint was dismissed as hearsay. Celia's lips pressed into a thin line. Meaning Bellamy wasn't acting alone. Helena used him as a front. They studied the photograph again, newly aware of each detail. The boot scuff, the loose sleeve cuff, the quick tilt of the head. Lucinda felt a cold thrill. We need to find Helena. Marianne stood. Her last known address is in the directory. 2 blocks from here. With the photograph secured in an envelope, the sisters and the detective's son departed the archive room, footsteps echoing down the corridor. Outside, autumn wind rattled the windows. The chase was no longer academic. It pulsed with urgency. They arrived at a modest bungalow, its paint flaking beneath a canopy of maples. Marianne rapped on the door. After a heartbeat, it opened to reveal a woman whose eyes widened at the sight of the photograph. How did you get this? Helena's voice trembled. Lucinda stepped forward, locket catching the fading light. We know what you did. We saw you in the foyer, helping Bellamy. You hid evidence, moved boxes, and erased your tracks. Elena's shoulders sagged as the photograph fluttered in her hand. I didn't mean for it to go that far," she whispered. "I thought I could control it." Marianne's gaze was steady. Control what? Stolen keepsakes? Innocence? Tears welled in Helena's eyes. "My mother. She was Miss Harper. She trusted me to protect her files. But Bellamy blackmailed me. He said if I didn't help, he'd ruin her reputation." Nora's expression softened. "So you were protecting your aunt?" Helena nodded, voice cracking. "But it spiraled. I never wanted those pearls out." "There. I thought I could stop it after prom." Lucinda took a deep breath, heart pounding. "Your secret is out, but if you help us shut down the rest of Bellamy's network, it might make amends." Helena closed her eyes and exhaled. "I'll tell you everything." As dusk settled over the bungalow, the photograph's truth had led them to a new ally, one whose confession would untangle another strand of betrayal. And with Helena's cooperation, the final pieces of their 20-year puzzle were finally clicking into place. Nora held the sequin dress up against the fading afternoon light, the iridescent beads shimmering like captured starlight. It was Lucinda's gown from that final dance, now hanging on a padded hanger in Marianne's living room. The dress still smelled faintly of lilac and sweat, a perfume of memory both sweet and uneasy. Lucinda reached inside the side seam, where she'd once tucked her locket, and ran her fingers along the lining. "I found something," she whispered, drawing out a small, folded square of paper. The sisters gathered around, curiosity flickering in their eyes. The note was yellowed, and brittle ink faded but legible. "Meet me backstage, midnight. No signature, no date. Marianne frowned. "Backstage at prom. Who wrote this?" Celia unpinned the sequins along the seam, revealing a narrow slit in the lining. Beneath it lay a tiny camera module, no larger than a button. Wires coiled like dark vines leading into the hem. "They installed this to record us," she said, voice low. "Bellamy's work, but someone else must have suggested the target." Lucinda smoothed the note on her knee. "This invitation someone wanted, to isolate one of us." She looked at Nora. "You were the first to slip away for coffee before the last dance." Nora swallowed. "I did meet someone backstage, Coach Brevard. He said he wanted to congratulate me on my speech." She paused. "But I never saw who handed him this note." Marianne set the dress aside and paced. So the camera captured more than corridors. It could have filmed private moments. She squared her shoulders. "We need to see the footage." Celia rose and fetched her laptop. She connected the camera module via a converter and tapped at the keys. The screen flickered, then settled on grainy black and white frames. Locker-lined corridors, the edge of the stage, and flashes of movement. Lucinda's silhouette, Marianne's back, Nora's profile. Suddenly, a slender hand crept into frame, adjusting the camera's angle before slipping away. "Pause," Celia said, freezing the image. They leaned in. The sleeve was familiar, linen with a distinct embroidered cuff. Lucinda recognized it immediately as Helena Harper's archival blouse. "She must have hidden this camera for Bellamy," Lucinda said, heart tightening. The footage resumed, capturing the coach's broad shoulders stepping into view. He conversed with Nora under the dim glow of exit signs. Then the camera tilted, pointing toward the empty bleachers. A second figure emerged. Tall, lithe, wearing a dark suit coat instead of the denim they'd come to expect. The figure pressed something into the coach's hand, the folded note. Marianne gasped. "That's Principal Hargrove." Lucinda froze. He was never questioned. The file ended abruptly. Celia scrolled through timestamps. The camera had recorded just 15 minutes before shutting down. "Helena set this up, but Hargrove used it," she said. "He orchestrated the meeting." Nora closed her eyes. He wanted to control the narrative. With that footage and the pearls, he could manipulate the coach and us. Marianne clenched her fists. He's been principal for a decade longer than any of us realized. Lucinda slid the note back into her pocket. We need to confront him with proof. She stood lifting the dress and draping it over a chair. Tomorrow at sunrise, we'll go to his office. We'll present the camera and the note. Celia nodded, and Helena's testimony. They gathered in a silent circle, the shimmering sequins cascading like raindrops in the lamplight. 4 sisters, once girls in gowns, now women armed, with evidence, ready to face the man who'd pulled strings from behind the velvet curtain. As the evening shadows lengthened outside, Lucinda brushed a stray sequin from her lap. Our secrets may be sewn into that dress, she said softly, but now we unpick the stitches and reveal the truth. And beneath the glassy beads, the last hidden compartments of their past began to unfold. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when Lucinda arrived at Principal Hargrove's glass-fronted office, its lights already glowing against the pale morning sky. She carried Helena by the elbow, Marianne and Celia flanking her, while Nora brought up the rear with the camera. Module and the folded note. Hargrove looked up from his paperwork behind the heavy mahogany desk, surprise flickering in his grey eyes. Lucinda set the small evidence bag on the desk with deliberate calm. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Her voice was steady, though her pulse throbbed. Helena's hand trembled at Lucinda's side. Hargrove cleared his throat. Questions? About what? His tone was polite, but guarded. Marianne stepped forward. About the sequin dress camera. We found footage of you handing a note to Coach Brevard just before he pocketed our corsage. She slid the photograph across his desk. Care to explain? He studied it for a long moment. I was acting in the school's interest. His fingers drummed the wood. There were rumors of tampering in the gym. I needed proof. Celia pressed, You used a hidden camera sewn into Lucinda's dress without our consent, just to gather evidence. She held up the module. That's invasive. Hargrove pinched the bridge of his nose. I did what I thought necessary. His gaze cut to Helena, then back. Your aunt threatened to expose Bellamy's trafficking ring. I wanted to corroborate her claims. Nora's voice was quiet, but firm. She wrote here that you instructed her to move evidence into Box H. You concealed files for years. She tapped the archive journal open to Miss Harper's entry. Why protect Bellamy? His shoulders slumped. I hoped he'd stop. I thought removing items from public view would end the scandal. He met Helena's eyes and swallowed. I was wrong. Lucinda laid the folded note beside his hand. You manipulated 2 investigations, ours and the internal inquiry, by withholding files and planting footage. You compromised our trust and enabled Bellamy's crimes. Hargrove closed his eyes. I thought if I controlled the narrative, I could minimize damage to the school's reputation. He opened them. But I lost sight of right and wrong. Marianne unfolded the note. You invited Nora backstage, isolated her and recorded private moments. That's abuse of power. He nodded, shame darkening his expression. I apologize. I never imagined it would hurt you all so deeply. Celia leaned forward. An apology doesn't erase what you've done. You'll have to answer to the board and possibly law enforcement. Hargrove exhaled, gaze dropping to their locketed throats. I understand. He reached for the telephone. I'm calling a meeting, now. I'll turn over all evidence, and I will step down. Helena stepped forward, voice trembling but confident. I'll provide my full statement, too. She placed the journal on his desk. Lucinda nodded, relief and resolve mingling in her chest. That's a start. But we still have more to uncover. She met each sister's gaze. Today, we finish this. As Principal Hargrove picked up the phone, the four sisters and their unexpected ally stood in quiet unity, a promise fulfilled through truth and the first step of many interviews to come. In the soft glow of morning, their long quest shifted from discovery to accountability, each word spoken forging the final chapters of their story. Autumn sunlight filtered through the library's tall windows, illuminating rows of yearbooks and college application guides as the sisters gathered around a heavy oak table. Between files on Bellamy and Hargrove lay their own old school albums, spines cracked, corners dog-eared. Lucinda carefully opened hers to the senior section where she and her sisters once posed, corsages in hand, smiles bright. "Remember the Claytons?" Marianne asked, pointing to a photograph of two girls flanking their dates. "They were always competing with us, grades, sports, everything." Celia nodded. "They never missed a chance to one-up us." She thumbed through pages to a spread featuring the Claytons winning the math decathlon. Their victory party was the same night as ours. Nora frowned. Could they have had motive? Jealousy can breed desperation. Lucinda closed her album and reached for Marianne's. "Let's look at their pictures. It might remind us of who they became." Marianne's album revealed one of the Claytons, Vanessa, crowned homecoming queen that October, the other, Claire, captain of the debate team. Both polished, unflinching in photos, but Marianne found a yearbook. Note scrawled next to Vanessa's senior portrait, "To V, congrats on beating us again. See you at prom." The inscription bore a looped cursive that matched a signature on an anonymous letter the sisters had received early in their investigation, a taunting note warning them to watch their backs. Celia's breath caught. That's her handwriting. She compared the loops in a high-resolution scan, and here she pointed to a page in Nora's yearbook. Someone wrote, "Enjoy the dance. Hope it's memorable." The same ominous tone. Nora exhaled. So Vanessa Clayton may have orchestrated the theft as the ultimate revenge, steal our moment to outshine us. Marianne tapped the table. And Claire could have helped. Debate team kids know how to manipulate narratives. Lucinda's gaze sharpened. We need to be sure. Let's cross-reference their schedules. Did either of them have access to the gym that night? They retrieved sign-in logs from the sports office. Claire's name appeared under field trip supervision that evening. She'd reported to help set up bleachers, and Vanessa's signature was on the floral delivery sheet, confirming she'd handled the corsage box. The library clock chimed. Lucinda closed the yearbooks. They both had the means. She spread copies of security footage from the gym's back entrance. Remember the camera angle that caught a flash of denim beside Bellamy? Let's check. For Claire's uniform jacket. They enhanced the frames, and there, just before midnight, Claire's debate team blazer crept into view. The embroidered crest matched the one stitched onto the jacket found in Bellamy's shop records. Marianne exhaled, pinching the bridge of her nose. So Claire colluded with Bellamy, but why implicate the coach? Nora tapped her chin. They needed a distraction. Hargrove and the coach were bigger fish, higher stakes. Celia opened her notebook, and the anonymous letters. They kept our attention away from Clayton's until Bellamy and Hargrove took the fall. Lucinda looked at her sisters, pride and disbelief mingling in her eyes. Long-buried rivalries drove them to hijack our prom, turn it into their grand revenge. Marianne closed the folder. It's time we confront them. Later that afternoon, the Claytons arrived at the schoolhouse office, summoned by Lucinda's careful letter. Vanessa and Claire entered, expressions polished but guarded. Across the desk, Lucinda laid out the evidence, yearbook inscriptions, security footage, and the matching crest. Vanessa's cool mask cracked. You think we'd stoop that low? Claire's gaze flicked to her sister. Maybe you did, she said quietly, but some rivalries never die. Lucinda held their steady stares. They can end tonight. As the siblings watched the confrontation unfold, the final piece clicked into place. A rivalry born of ambition, nurtured by envy, executed in betrayal. And in that moment, four sisters saw how the echoes of high school competition had shadowed their lives and how together they finally put it to rest. The afternoon light filtered through the living room windows, casting a soft glow on the old piano in the corner where Marianne sat, hands folded in her lap. Lucinda knelt beside her, concern etched in every line of her face. Across the room, Celia arranged photographs on the coffee table, yearbook spreads, security stills, and the worn note from the sequin dress. Nora hovered near the doorway, watchful and quiet. Marianne's gaze drifted to a framed prom portrait on the wall, the four sisters in their gowns, smiling before the night unraveled. She exhaled, voice trembling. "I remember something else." She closed her eyes, as though summoning the memory from across decades. After the dance, I went backstage to find water. I passed through the corridor where the janitor's closet was, and I saw Vanessa Clayton's face in the window pane, her reflection watching me. Lucinda's hand tightened on Marianne's arm. "Why didn't you tell us?" Marianne's lips quivered. I was scared. She stared at me like she knew my every thought. Then she slipped away, and the door closed so quietly I thought it was locked. Celia paused in her sorting. "That's when the corsage went missing, wasn't it?" Marianne nodded, tears brimming. I walked into the gym foyer and saw Claire whispering to Bellamy, handing him something small, maybe the pearls. I froze, heart pounding. She wiped a tear away. They looked right at me, and I swear Claire smirked before disappearing into the shadows. Nora exhaled softly. "So they intended for you to see them, to unsettle you." Marianne's shoulders shook. "They wanted to break me." She looked at Lucinda. "I felt so alone, so foolish for not telling you all. I thought you'd be disappointed." Lucinda cupped her sister's face. "We promised honesty. What you saw is crucial." She glanced at Celia. "This ties in with the footage from the archives, the figure behind Bellamy." Celia moved to join them. "And with the rivalry we uncovered, Vanessa's note in your yearbook, it was more than taunt, it was warning." She tapped the framed photo. "They toyed with us, using our bonds against us." Marianne's tears fell freely now. "I carried that guilt for 20 years, thinking, I let you down." She turned to Nora. "You noticed my absence that night. You chased after me, but I wouldn't tell you where I'd gone." Nora embraced her. "We were four, and we faced this together. No one failed us." Silence settled as Marianne composed herself. She glanced at the piano, fingers drifting to the ivory keys. "I want to record this, to honor the memory of my fear and courage." She lifted her hands and began to play a simple, mournful melody. The sisters gathered around, listening, as each note whispered the ache of that night and the relief of finally speaking the truth. When the final chord faded, Marianne opened her eyes, resolute. "Thank you for giving me this space. My memory, my recall, will help us confront Vanessa and Claire with the full story." Lucinda rose and gathered the photographs into a neat stack. "Tomorrow, at the reunion, we'll present everything, your testimony, the evidence, the footage. No more secrets." Celia placed a comforting hand on Marianne's shoulder. "Our voices are stronger together." As dusk fell, the sisters lingered in the living room, the piano's echo still waiting in the air. Marianne's tearful recall had unlocked the final barrier, proof that long-buried memories held the key to justice, and in that gentle moment, four sisters reaffirmed their promise to face the past, unflinching and united, until every secret was laid bare. A neon glow pulsed through the smoky haze as Lucinda and her sisters slipped into the Velvet Note, a jazz nightclub downtown that had quietly thrived for decades. The velvet-draped walls and low-slung booths felt worlds away from the polished school corridors where their battles had played out. They'd come here chasing a lead. Vanessa Clayton's name had surfaced in a payment ledger, an entry for consulting fees, dated 6 months after that fateful prom. Celia led the way to a corner table where an elderly maitre d' in a crisp vest regarded them cautiously. She showed him a photograph of Vanessa, fresh from the yearbook, and he nodded slowly. "Ms. Clayton worked here as an assistant manager," he whispered. "She left abruptly in 2005, never explained why." Marianne adjusted her scarf. "Do you remember where she went?" He shook his head. "No, she'd come in after hours sometimes, meeting someone in the back office. I never asked." He tapped his chest. "Best kept my head down." Nora folded her arms. "Who did she meet?" His expression flickered. "A promoter, a man named Santos. He ran the backroom events. He dealt with high rollers and private auctions." He hesitated, voice dropping. "Last I heard, he moved overseas." Lucinda's heart quickened. "Santos, that's SK in Bellamy's ledger." The maitre d' paled. "You know of the ledger?" He glanced around. "You're treading dangerous ground." Celia held up her locket. "We've come too far to back down." He swallowed, then leaned closer. Santos was ruthless. He'd acquire anything rare, memorabilia, jewelry, even personal recordings. Clayton supplied him with fresh goods. Marianne exchanged a glance with Nora. "That connects Bellamy's sales to a global ring." The maitre d' nodded. "Yes, and Clayton's role was more than complicit. She vetted each piece, ensured authenticity." Lucinda exhaled softly. "So she orchestrated the theft, funneled the items through Bellamy, then on to Santos's auctions." He dipped his head. "She had debts, gambling, I think, but she didn't foresee the scandal. When prom night blew up, Hargrove and Bellamy froze her out. She vanished, taking her cut and leaving them to face the fall." Marianne's jaw tightened. "And Claire? Did she help move goods?" He pursed his lips. "Claire was more cautious. She handled logistics, labels, shipping. She stayed behind the scenes until Clayton left. Then she faded too." Nora leaned forward. "We need names, contacts in that ledger." The maitre d' placed a hand on a small ledger lying beside him. "I've kept records." He slid it across the table. "Be careful with this." Lucinda opened the ledger. Names, dates, wire transfers, silent signatures linking Santos, Clayton, Bellamy, and even Hargrove. The network sprawled across continents. Celia's breath caught. "This is the link we need for the authorities." Marianne closed the book with a gentle thud. "And the proof that Vanessa and Claire engineered everything for their own gain." Outside, the saxophone riff from the stage floated through the air, its melancholy notes underscoring the gravity of their discovery. Lucinda slipped the ledger into her bag. "Thank you," she said to the maitre d'. "You've given us the final piece." He nodded, relief and regret mingling in his eyes. "Just make it stop." As they left the Velvet Note, the city lights braided above them. The ledger felt heavy with truths that had slept in smoky back rooms for years. 4 sisters walked, side by side, determined to deliver justice not only for their stolen prom, but for every misplaced keepsake their rivals had bartered away. And in the hush between the nightclub's melody and the night's embrace, they knew the end of this journey was finally within reach. Moonlight sifted through the blinds as Lucinda pored over the chain of custody logs at Detective Rowan's office. The ledger from the Velvet Note lay open beside her, and the janitor's notebook, principal's files, and yearbook inscriptions formed a half-circle of evidence on the desk. Tonight they untangled the last alibi. Claire Clayton's claim that she'd been home with her sick mother on prom night. Marianne joined her, spreading a crumpled hospital discharge form across the papers. She produced this in 2004, she said. Mother's admitted for dehydration, but look at the timestamp, 8:15 p.m., before the dance even started. She tapped the form. Claire's statement said she stayed until midnight. Lucinda frowned. So she left before. The theft. She could have met Bellamy, handed off the pearls and corsage, then stormed home. Nora arrived with coffee, setting mugs before them. I checked traffic cameras on the route to her house. There's a gap, no footage from 9 to 10:30, exactly when the theft occurred. Celia leaned in, pointing to a smudged timestamp on one camera. That's Claire's car, headlights passing at 9:12 p.m., heading toward Bellamy's shop on Main Street. Marianne's lips tightened. She planned it down to the minute. Lucinda clicked through emails from Claire's college. Application, one sent at 7:42 p.m., then nothing until 12:03 a.m. A curt reply, thanking the admissions counselor for patience. She fabricated an email alibi, too. Nora slid a printed map across the desk. Here's the path, gym to back alley, onto Main Street, in and out of Bellamy's within 10 minutes, then back home. Celia tapped the ledger entry. 9:18 p.m. Special processing, YC Gym. That's when Bellamy received the all items. She paused. Claire stamped that. It matches her handwriting on the yearbook note. Lucinda drew a steady breath. Her sick mother. A convenient ruse. She rose, gathering the documents. We have everything. Logs, footage, timestamps, handwriting matches, ledger entries. Time to confront her one final time, with no escape. They piled into Marianne's car and drove to the Clayton residence. The street was silent. Houses, dark except for a single light in Claire's window. Lucinda knocked firmly. Moments later, Claire opened the door, her expression guarded, until she saw the stack of evidence in Lucinda's arms. Come in, she said, voice taut. Inside, the living room furniture was unchanged from their youth. Family portraits, trophies on the shelf. Claire motioned to a chair. Lucinda sat and laid the papers on the coffee table. Marianne spoke first. Your alibi doesn't hold up. Hospital records show your mother's treatment ended before you left. She slid the discharge form forward. Claire's jaw stiffened. That doesn't prove I wasn't here for the rest of the night. Nora placed the traffic log on top of the form. Your car passed the alley camera at 9:12 p.m. It aligns with Bellamy's ledger at 9:18 p.m. You were at his shop. Celia added the email printout. Your inbox shows no activity between 7:42 and 12:03. You fabricated your digital trail. Claire's eyes flicked to the ledger from the velvet note. Marianne nudged it closer. You paid consulting fees here, after everyone thought you disappeared. Claire's composure cracked. She stood, pacing. You don't understand. I needed money. Gambling debts. Bellamy offered a quick fix. I thought I could control it. Lucinda's gaze was unwavering. You manipulated the system. Hiding evidence with Hargrove, planting cameras, sending anonymous taunts, weaving false alibis. Claire's shoulders slumped. It was never supposed to hurt you like this. Marianne's voice was cold. You chose this path. Claire sank onto the couch, tears glistening. I'm sorry. Lucinda placed a hand on her sister's locket. Your apology is just a word, unless you dismantle what you built. Confess to the authorities, return the remaining archives, and help end this network. Claire nodded, voice trembling. I will. As dawn's first light edged the windows with pink, 4 sisters watched Claire's admission mark the final unraveling of a carefully constructed alibi. At last, the truth lay bare, and with it, the bonds of betrayal began to mend under the promise of justice. Detective Rowan's office was brightly lit when the sisters arrived, evidence in hand and determination in their strides. Behind his desk lay a slim file labeled "Case Closed," a suggestive title he had left deliberately. He looked up from the file with tired eyes as Lucinda, Marianne, Celia and Nora filed into the room, each carrying pieces of the puzzle they'd gathered. Lucinda placed Claire's signed confession on the desk. This outlines her role, the alibis, and the ledger entries. She tapped the paper. "It's time for the final file." Rowan nodded, flipping through the confession before sliding it into a manila folder stamped Exhibit E. Marianne laid out the security footage stills. Coach Brevard, Helena, Vanessa and Claire caught in sequence frames. "These visuals corroborate every testimony," she said. Celia added the ledger from the velvet note, now tagged Exhibit F, and the archive box inventory list as Exhibit G. Nora presented the embellished yearbook photographs with matched handwriting samples, labeled Exhibit H. One by one, each item found a place in the folder, creating a comprehensive dossier that traced the trafficking ring from Bellamy's shop to Santos's auctions. Rowan leaned forward, voice hoarse. "This is the most thorough case file I've ever assembled." He ran a finger along the typed summary at the front. Chronology of events, suspects, evidence, chain of custody, witness statements, expert analyses. He paused, meeting Lucinda's gaze. "With this, the district attorney can indict everyone involved. Bellamy, Hargrove, Vanessa, Claire, and potentially Santos." Lucinda exhaled, relief and resolve mingling in her chest. "It's everything. The past 20 years laid bare." She glanced at her sisters. "We couldn't have done it without each of us speaking up." Marianne smiled. Marlowe and Celia nodded, and Nora folded her arms, proud. Rowan placed a final document in the folder, a sworn affidavit requesting expedited hearings and asset freezes. "I've included motions to seize Santos's assets, freeze Bellamy's accounts, and ensure restitution for victims." He snapped the folder shut and fed it to Lucinda. "This is your final file. It belongs to you now." Lucinda lifted it, weighty with justice and closure. "We'll deliver it to the DA this afternoon. After that, it's out of our hands." She paused. "But knowing it's complete makes all the late nights and hard truths worthwhile." He rose, offering each sister a weary but proud smile. "You showed courage, unity, and persistence. This file is a testament to your promise." They exchanged quiet congratulations, the gravity of the moment settling around them like a benediction. Lucinda slipped the folder under her arm and turned toward the door. As she reached the threshold, she looked back once. "Thank you," she said softly. Stepping into the hallway, the sisters moved forward together, bound by a promise that had carried them from sparkling gowns through dark hallways, smoky nightclubs, and dusty archives, all the way to this final file. The case was no longer a mystery, but a closed chapter, sealed by truth and the unwavering strength of 4 sisters. The grand ballroom shimmered under a canopy of crystal chandeliers, the polished mahogany floor reflecting prismatic light in every direction. Family portraits lined the walls alongside framed news clippings celebrating the school's centennial. Tonight's gala marked the reopening of the renovated gymnasium, once the stage of their darkest secrets. Lucinda stood near the entrance, the final file secured in her clutch purse, eyes sweeping the crowd of alumni, faculty, and dignitaries. Marianne joined her, paper program in hand. "Ready?" she whispered. Lucinda nodded. They exchanged a reassuring smile before stepping into the glittering room, where laughter mingled with the soft strains of a string quartet. Across the hour, ballroom, Nora and Celia stood beside Detective Rowan and Principal Hargrove. both men quieter now, their reputations irrevocably altered, yet present to witness the night's culmination. As the MC ushered guests to their tables, Lucinda made her way to the podium, draped in deep blue velvet. She climbed the steps, heart steady despite the memories waiting in the wings. A hush fell. She offered a graceful nod to the audience. "Thank you all for joining us this evening," she began, voice clear and resonant. 20 years ago, these very walls echoed with music, laughter, and the promise of hope. But for my sisters and me, it was also where betrayal took root. She paused, glancing at Marianne, Celia, and Nora for support. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Lucinda continued, "Tonight, we reclaim this space, not just as survivors, but as bearers of truth." She held up the final file. "With the diligent work of Detective Rowan, the honesty of witnesses, and our own resolve, we've closed a chapter of deceit that spanned decades." Bellamy, Hargrove, Vanessa Clayton, Claire Clayton, and their accomplices have been brought to justice. A murmur swept the room. Lucinda lowered the folder. "This file represents more than evidence. It embodies promise. The promise my sisters and I made to protect one another, to seek the truth, and to ensure that no memory would be stolen again." She set the file on a small table beside the podium, its leather cover gleaming under the chandelier light. "Let this night remind us that even under the brightest lights, shadows can linger. But with courage and unity, we can illuminate every corner." Marianne rose then, stepping forward to draw aside a velvet curtain, revealing a restored section of the original bleachers from the 2004 gym. Each seat bore a small plaque honoring the 5 friends whose disappearance first set their quest in motion. "We also honor those whose stories became entwined with ours," Marianne said softly. Hand resting on the nearest plaque, Celia joined them, waving to Detective Rowan. "And we thank those who carried our burden, the investigators, journalists, and community members who refused to let silence stand." Nora turned to Principal Hargrove, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "And those who admitted mistakes and chose redemption." Light applause began, growing as more guests stood. Lucinda returned to the podium. "Tonight, let us celebrate renewal of this gym, of our trust in one another, and of the power of truth." She lifted her glass. "To promises kept." Glasses clinked across the ballroom. The quartet resumed playing as guests returned to their seats, inspired by the sisters' testimony. Lucinda descended the podium and joined her siblings beneath the crystal glow, hands clasped. In that moment, under the ballroom lights, 4 sisters stood triumphant, not just over their personal tragedy, but over every secret that had shadowed their path. The truth at last was set free, and with it their promise shone brighter than any chandelier above.